Hello and welcome to my podcast. My name is Peter Doherty. I'm a Catholic priest and a psychologist who integrates my training in psychology and scripture studies to help understand the Gospels from a psychological perspective and seek out new pastoral teachings for Christians in these modern times. My podcast usually lasts about 7 to 10 minutes, where I share insights and reflections. I hope they will be useful to you. Today's podcast is from Mark chapter 5, verse 21 to 43. This gospel will be read in churches June 30th, 2024. Today's gospel is a miracle healing story within a resurrection story. The first is the story of a woman who was healed after many years of suffering from hemorrhages. This miracle story is unique, as the miracle happens without her saying anything to Jesus. She believes that she simply needs to touch the hem of his garment for the healing. She is correct. She is indeed healed. What follows is noteworthy. Jesus asks, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples are understandably amazed at this question, as they are in a crowded space. I am also surprised that Jesus had to ask who touched him. We have many accounts of Jesus being able to read the minds of the Pharisees. For example, Luke chapter 5, verse 22, or Mark chapter 2, verse 8 to 11. Surely Jesus, who could read the minds of the Pharisees, would be very capable of reading the mind of this woman. Perhaps Jesus wanted to make a point. Jesus was fully a teacher and would not pass up a teachable moment. By calling this woman out, he is making a point that her faith played an important part of her healing. She made herself available for Jesus to act, and in doing so provides us with a model of what true faith can accomplish. At the risk of overanalyzing this story, I wonder if there is significance in the fact that the woman hemorrhages blood. Blood represents life itself, as stated in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. This verse forms the basis of the prohibition in Judaism against consuming meat with blood. Before the Exodus from Egypt, the Israelites marked their doorposts with the blood of a lamb, so the angel of death would pass over their homes. This is commemorated in the Passover ritual of dipping a finger in wine, representing blood. Blood represents both sanctity of life and the means of atonement and purification in Jewish law and tradition. Its symbolic power stems from the biblical conception of blood as the essence of life itself. According to early Jewish teachings, this woman was literally having her life force, blood, being drained from her. Bleeding would make her impure, according to Jewish law. She would be cut off from her family and community. Her affliction also had religious and social consequences. Jesus did not only restore her to physical health, but he also restored her to emotional health as well. Fortunately, we don't know much about this woman, no name or account of whatever happened next. I would like to talk briefly about her probable experiences leading up to that fateful meeting with Jesus that we hear about in today's gospel. Because of her affliction, she was likely ostracized by the community. She had money at one time, as Mark points out, that she had spent all she had. She had endured much under many physicians. So she probably had access to a family, but because of her bleeding, she would be seen as unclean and likely was on the fringe of her family. Likely, she would also have been seen as a drain on the family resources. This would do nothing for her self-esteem. Rather than just accept her fate, however, she becomes proactive and persevered. She has a plan. She knows that because she was seen as unclean, she won't likely get a chance to speak to Jesus directly. But that doesn't stop her. She knew about Jesus and that he was a healer. From a distance, she likely had witnessed Jesus preach and had seen him heal people. Despite being anemic from loss of blood and burdened with many obstacles she faced, she was determined to have Jesus heal her with or without his permission. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your diseases." She had faith, but what faith? Did she believe that Jesus was the Son of God? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. We do know that she did have the faith to believe that Jesus could help her and would help her. That's enough for Jesus and enough for us. Do we believe that Jesus can and wants to be part of our life? We don't have to have it all together for faith to work in our lives. The last point I want to draw your attention to is that this healing is unique. In every other case where Jesus heals someone, there is a dialogue between Jesus and the one seeking the healing. In some cases, Jesus performs some ritual or makes a request. We see this, for example, in John chapter 9, verse 6 to 7, or Luke chapter 17, verse 11 to 19. But there is no request here or response from Jesus. Merely touching his cloak is enough. Jesus is not someone who bestows healing. His essence is healing. Healing and being restored is a given. It's not something that we have to earn. It's a free gift. I know people have prayed for healing, and it hasn't happened. I don't have a complete answer, but I urge people to see more than just the physical healing. People also need healing emotionally, socially, cognitively, and spiritually. The theme of faith continues when Jesus is called to cure the daughter of Jairus. We know little about who Jairus was. Jesus learns that the child has died, and at this point, the people are not expecting Jesus to do anything further. Jesus still goes to the child and declares that she is not dead, but sleeping. This statement prompts the people who apparently did not have faith to laugh at Jesus for his diagnosis of the situation. Jesus then sends these unbelievers away. He could have said, "Hey, watch me raise this girl from the dead." But Jesus is not interested in performing and only has the child's parents and 3 of his disciples join him. He deals with unbelievers very differently from how he handles the Pharisees. Even though the Pharisees were actively trying to discredit him, Jesus still debates with them. When Nicodemus, a Pharisee, came to see Jesus in the middle of the night, Jesus still talks with him. Yet, when the people who are mourning the death of Jairus' daughter, Jesus doesn't want to have anything to do with them. True to his word, Jesus can raise a child to life. Jesus also gives us an approach to deal with negative or toxic people in our life. He established a clear boundary between himself and negative people. Nobody is 100% toxic or negative, but we also may need to establish a personal boundary around relationships that become toxic. Having appropriate boundaries is necessary for our mental health and spiritual health. Finally, Jesus cures the girl, and to prove that she is not a ghost, Mark adds that Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Jesus then gives them strict orders not to share this information. There are many examples in the Gospels of Jesus performing a miracle, but then not wanting anyone to know. This is known as the messianic secret, and there are several reasons for this. The most obvious is that Jesus does not want crowds following him, crowds who want him to work miracles. Jesus is not a magician. Often the people healed talk anyway, and we know that Jesus had large crowds following him, and likely many were simply curious. The second reason is that Jesus did not want the people's faith based on witnessing a miracle. Rather, Jesus wanted the people's faith to be based on a relationship with God and based on teachings that spoke to their hearts, moving them to conversion. I suspect that Jesus performed some miracles out of compassion for the individual, not to create faith. Finally, if Jesus' identity was revealed too early in his ministry, he would have attracted the attention of political leaders who would likely resist or intervene. We see an example of this at Jesus' birth, when we read in Matthew 2, verse 16, when according to legend, King Herod had children killed in an effort to protect his power. It seems to me that Jesus performed these miracles out of the goodness of his heart, love for his people. He knew that miracles would create problems for him later on. Let us understand these healing stories as a sign of God's love for us. Thank you for listening. I invite you to join me next week when I examine the Gospel of Mark, who talks about Jesus returning to his hometown, only to find the people not very welcoming. If this is the first time you've heard my podcast and you're interested in hearing more, I urge you to listen to my podcasts listed on the website. Every Sunday, I release a new podcast focusing on the gospel for the following week. I invite you to listen to all the podcasts, and I hope the reflections are useful to you. The link is https://a_a_looks_psychologist_at_scripture.buzzsprout.com. The podcast is also available on YouTube. I also would like to thank my team, Heather Patel-Doherty and Richard Coulombe, who play an important part in the preparation for this podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, I can be reached by email at peter.doherty, that's DOHERTYOMI, @gmail.com. God bless, and I hope you have a blessed week. Take care.